I like being close. I like to see eye contact. Nobody messing around. Those who don't know me, my name is Will, and good morning and welcome. We got a beautiful crowd here. Beautiful day. I went to bed last night. It was raining, windy. Today is gorgeous. Amen.
Amen.
You know, we don't probably remember when it happened, but when it did, we were absolutely fascinated by it. And it was the time we first saw ourselves in a mirror. We were startled. We were shocked. We were probably confused. Who is this person looking at me? Then what made the mirror really fascinating was when it finally dawned on us, hey, I'm looking at me. This is what I look like. The mirror, it becomes increasingly important in your life. Whether you're about to go to school, go to work, go on a date, get married. The one thing that we make sure we do before we leave the house, we look in the mirror. The reason is the mirror, it never lies. The mirror shows you what you look like when you have makeup on and when you don't. When you're clean shaven and when you're not. When every hair is in place or every hair is out of place, or you don't have any hair to put in place. There is nothing fake or hidden in your mirror image. So today we're going to be in Daniel, if you haven't picked it out by now. Chapter 6, 1 through 16. The title of the message is called Under the Microscope, the Mirror Image. You know, we're not talking about what you see physically when you look in a mirror. We're talking about what you see spiritually, morally, ethically. We're going to be talking about the most important thing about all of us, and that is our character. What do you see when you look in a mirror? I mean, I don't on the outside. But what if the mirror were to reflect what you were like on the inside? What would you see? Or more importantly, what should you see? You know, we are living in a day where people are far more concerned about their reputation than they are about their character. And the latter is not always a true reflection of their former. Your reputation is what people think you are when they see you through a window. Your character is what you know you are when you see yourself in a mirror. And it has been said, people are like trees. The shadow of the tree is reputation. The fruit of the tree is personality. But the root of the tree is character. And Abraham Lincoln said it best. Character is like a tree and reputation is like its shadow. The shadow is what we think of it. The tree is the real thing. So here's a great question to ask yourself. If your reputation met your character on the street, would they recognize each other? The question is, what makes up good character? What would be the character traits that would be true of you if your character was not just good, but godly? Or your character was not just what you would like it to be, but what God would want you to be. I want to say to you that the first trait that would be real in your life, the first thing that people would know about you, if you truly have the right character, it would be integrity. If you were building a house made out of character, the foundation would be integrity. You've heard the saying many times, everything rises and falls on leadership, and that is true. But leadership rises and falls on integrity. Integrity is more important than fame or fortune, believe it or not. It is more important than position, possessions, popularity. What you accomplish will make your name known, but your integrity will determine whether your name is worth knowing. Today we're going to study a man who I believe is the picture of integrity, and it's because of his integrity that we even know who he was and why he has a book in the Bible. His name was Daniel. And anyone familiar with the Bible, they think about Daniel in the lion's den. It is found in Daniel chapter 6. And what's important about this story is not that Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. It is on what happened before Daniel was thrown into the lion's den and why he was thrown into the lion's den. It teaches us 3 important lessons about integrity. Why it's so important and why we must have it. Number 1, live a life of integrity. Again, when we think of Daniel, we automatically go to the lion's den. But the reason that he was thrown into the lion's den is more important than the fact that he was thrown into the lion's den. We often forget what got him into the lion's den to begin with. Verse 1 and 2. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them that the king might not suffer loss. Now the satraps, they were the provincial governors, they were tax collectors. The king of the empire at this time was a pagan by the name of Darius. And he suspected that some of the people under him were not only not doing their work faithfully, but they were embezzling money. The emperor was so vast, so large, that he knew he had to surround himself with the best people to ensure honesty, accountability. He knew you're no better off than the people that you surround yourself with. It was absolutely critical that he find the best people possible to help him oversee the kingdom's affairs. There was one choice that was obvious, verse 3. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Now Daniel is 85 years old now. He's been serving Lord in Babylon for 70 years, and he's about now to go under the 3rd king. This new kid on the block, King Darius, it was likely that he never had met Daniel before. Though not everybody knew Daniel, everybody knew about Daniel. If you read the book of Daniel, you know that Daniel's reputation preceded him. For 7 decades, Daniel had proven himself to be a man of absolute, complete, impeccable integrity. Daniel was put in charge of everyone else. He was only second in command to the king himself. Integrity is the cream that always rises to the top. Integrity trumps ability every time. There is no limit to how far anyone can go if they can always know that they can be trusted to do the right thing. He was not promoted because of his temporal seniority, but because of his moral superiority. His character was a cut above everyone else. And we are going to see it was his integrity that got him into deep trouble. Verse 4. At this, the administrators and satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. You know, there was evidently a good old boy network here that had been skimming off the top. And they knew their days were over as long as Daniel was at the top. They all knew that Daniel was an outsider, a foreigner, an immigrant, a Jew, and they couldn't stand the thought of him being over them. So what did they do? They launched a full-scale investigation into his life. They literally threw the stink at him. They put a tail on him. They hired a private investigator. They bugged his phone. They analyzed his tax records. They examined his bank statements. And what did they find? Nothing. Zero. They brought in the FBI, the CIA, the IRS. They ordered him to turn over every rock for every bed, every drawer, and every closet. They couldn't lay a glove on him. They thought surely after 70 years of working in the government, there was something, anything they could cut Daniel down to size. But after putting him under the microscope, all they found was a man who for 70 years was honest, hardworking, and most important, holy. How was this case closed? This was their conclusion, verse 5. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has to do something with the law of his God." What a testimony. To be able to say about someone that you will never find anything legally on this guy, morally or ethically. Your only hope is to do something spiritually to Daniel, and they did. You'll see, when you live a life of integrity, life becomes surrounded with a force field of righteousness and goodness that can withstand anything. Number 2, the cost of integrity. You are free to exercise integrity, folks. But integrity is never free to exercise. Years ago, I heard someone say, if anything counts, it's going to cost. If it doesn't cost, it doesn't count. But if you know the story of Daniel, this wasn't his first rodeo. When it came to his integrity, what would prove to be potentially the most costly. Verse 6 through 8. So these administrators and satraps went as a group to king and said, "May King Darius live forever." The royal administrators, prefects, advisors, satraps, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, who cannot be repealed. You have to give these men credit. It was a brilliant idea. They had just checkmated Daniel. They knew they could find nothing immoral or unethical. They decided to make his faith illegal. Daniel, he didn't hide the fact that he prayed 3 times a day. He didn't hide the fact that he prayed to the only God there was. They passed this law with only Daniel in mind because they knew that if they made Daniel God illegal to pray to, he would have a 24-karat gold printed reservation to the lion's den. How could they be sure it would work? How did they know that Daniel what he would do? It's easy. They knew Daniel. For 7 decades, when it came to his integrity, Daniel's report card had nothing but straight A's. Every test was graded 100. They knew Daniel wouldn't fold. They knew Daniel would die. They understood how Daniel made every decision in his life. Theodore Hesburgh, former president of the University of Notre Dame, said this: "My basic principle is you don't make decisions because they're easy. You don't make them because they are cheap. You don't make them because they are popular. You make them because they're right." Though the king thought that Daniel had been involved in his decision, these men had lied. Daniel knew nothing, so we read in verse 10. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, the rubber had just hit the road in Daniel's faith, and it's really sad. He had offered a lifetime of honesty, decency, godly integrity into government service. He had served faithfully and loyally under every king. He had always done what was best for others. And what did he get for it? A gold watch? House down on Main Street? Severance package? Now he was facing the loss of his position, his security, his income, his friends, even his own life. I'll say it again. You are free to exercise integrity, folks. But it's not cheap to exercise integrity. You need to remember this. Integrity is not so you can always get what you want to have or to go where you want to land, but to be who you ought to be. Daniel was going to do whatever he did next with his eyes wide open, knowing full well the cost he may incur. He came through just like his enemies knew he would. In verse 10, he went home to his upstairs room where he opened the windows towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Nobody ordered Daniel to pray. Nobody was going to order Daniel not to pray. Now, a simple question for all of us that we need to ask is this: what would we have done? What would we have done? You know, Daniel, he didn't have options. He could have played it safe and quit praying for 30 days. He could have closed the windows and prayed in secret. He could have decided to take a month off and go on a sabbatical somewhere. He could have laid in bed at night and prayed silently. But you see, integrity, it never goes on vacation. Integrity never takes a break. It never calls a timeout. It never takes a pass. Integrity doesn't go with the flow. Integrity doesn't follow the crowd. Integrity stands its ground. Integrity doesn't listen to the polls. Integrity listens to nothing. It lives for principles. Integrity may leave you all alone. Because we find out in verse 13 that Daniel is the only one that was charged. Then they said to the king, Daniel, who is the one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. Whenever you are told to stand down and instead you stand up, you will stand out. And you may stand alone. Integrity never talks the talk. What does it do, folks? It walks the walk. It never veers off course. It never takes a shortcut. It never cuts corners. It stands tall. It stands tough. It stands true to what is right. That leads to the last thing we need to say about integrity. Pay the price of integrity. The traitors turn tattletale. They run to the king. They present their case. Verse 11-16. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not publish the decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den? The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. Then they said to the king, Daniel, who is the one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, remember, your majesty, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. So the king gave the order. And they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continuously, rescue you. Pretty high price for a lifetime of integrity, huh? It's not going to be quick like lethal injection, a beheading, a firing squad. A lion's den death is not pretty. They don't call him the king of the jungle for nothing. A hungry lion can eat 30% of his body weight in one sitting. That would be like an average person eating 200 quarter-pound hamburgers for lunch. No man, not even Tarzan. Because an average lion has the strength of 14 men. Now you have to feel for Daniel. You would think that after 70 years of faithfulness and godliness, an 85-year-old man wasn't going out this way. But that's the price you pay for integrity. Because you never outgrow integrity. And folks, you never get too old to do what is right. Daniel pays the ultimate price of being thrown into the lion's den to face an horrific death. I know some of you are thinking and you're saying, but wait a minute. Daniel was delivered from the lion's den. If you keep reading, yes, he was. But that's why I purposely stopped the story at verse 16. See, I want you to imagine that is where the story stopped. Because not everybody that gets thrown into a lion's den comes out alive. The only way you will ever maintain your integrity is when you make the same decision that Daniel made. You've got to make it every day, folks, before you get out of bed, go to school, go to work. You've got to make up your mind that your integrity is more important than your safety, your security, your prosperity, or your popularity. At the end of the day, there is just one question you should always be able to answer, 100% in the affirmative. It is not, did I do things right? But rather, did I do the right thing? 600 years later, a story eerily similar to this one took place. Listen to verse 17. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. He was thrown into a cave. A stone rolled across the entrance. Soldiers are placed there to guard the cave, and it is sealed. Another man faced death like Daniel, except he wasn't thrown into a lion's den. This man was nailed to a cross. Daniel didn't know whether he would live or die. But this man, oh, he knew he would die. We know, of course, that Daniel, he was delivered from death. But this man was delivered through death. Daniel didn't die. He came out alive. But this man died. But he came back again alive, amen? Both faced what they faced because of their integrity. Technically, Daniel was guilty because he broke the law. But Jesus was guilty because we broke the law. There is one other big difference. Daniel was guilty because he had broken man's law, but Jesus was guilty because we broken God's law. Jesus had made a promise before he even came to this planet Earth that he would follow the will of the Father and do the right thing and die for us so that we can live through him. Because of his integrity, we can. Yes, folks, there is a cost to consider. There's a cost to consider, and there's a price to pay for integrity. But when you do the cost-benefit analysis, the benefits far outweigh the cost. Because when you are a person of integrity, you never have to fear accusations or investigations. People can go through your closet because there's no skeletons in them. Your life is an open book because you have nothing to hide. So you live a life of integrity. Because when those times come and you're put under the microscope, all anybody will see is a light of integrity shining in your heart and the fire of purity burning in your soul. When we wake up tomorrow morning, when we go to bed tonight, we have a choice to make. I pray it's the right one. And it can only be the right one when we accept Jesus as the Lord. I have to say, God bless you. Thank you all for coming. Keep up the faith. Amen.